Hello, I'm Karen Young, CEO of WOZ, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today as part of the Digital Education Odyssey. I want to share with you some of the things that we've learned from Steve Wozniak about STEM education in K-12. He serves as our inspiration, and that process of having access to his mind and the way that he thinks about these things in a K-12 context has been a gift for us. Traditional routes to employment have been linear. We knew what we had to do to become an accountant or a welder or a lawyer or a plumber. But the world is changing, especially with the emphasis on technology. Learners now, particularly tech workers, have to always be in beta and be able to adapt to a new language or a new innovation. And so more and more now, employers are asking candidates to prove what they can do. Stephen noticed a disconnect starting in about 2015. He noticed the number of young people in his personal, professional, and family circle that were finishing their undergraduate degree, but didn't want to work in their area of major. And yet he'd get together with tech company gurus, and consistently they said the biggest barrier to fueling their innovation was finding enough people to do that. So Steve spent some time working with reskilling adult learners in boot camp kind of environments and found that too many of them failed or were only able to get the skills that were necessary to be at a help or a support desk, not the jobs that would help change the world. And that's when he realized, what if? What if my father had not been an engineer? Steve's dad was an engineer and gave him things to tinker with when he was 3 years old. He would let him take things apart in the household and put them back together. And if it didn't work when he put them back together, his father used that failure as an opportunity to coach him and expand his skill set. And Steve got very passionate then about wanting all kids in K-12 to get that opportunity to learn. So he told his board to find a company that was doing STEM in K-12 and doing it well, so he could help guide those efforts and produce even more fruitful outcomes. So we were discovered in the summer of 2017, and in October of 2017, we became WOZ. And since then, Steve and his mind has served as our inspiration. And I want to share with you some of the most important things that he's taught us about this work in hopes that you can incorporate them, if you aren't already, in your own STEM programs. Steve taught us that we need to support the teacher as a context expert, not a content expert. He said, if we have to develop a teacher's subject matter expertise in an area like artificial intelligence or cybersecurity for them to be able to teach, we're going to run out of time and run out of teachers. He said there has to be a way for us to have the teacher as the guide on the side and set them up for success as they learn with their students. And we found a way to do that because he also said, this work isn't about helping the students find the right answer as quickly as possible. Engineering is messy. We need to let them find their own routes. He said there are a million different ways to create a productive set of lines of code. There are a lot of different ways to approach CAD/CAM when you're 3D printing something. There isn't just one right answer. What there is a successful end product. And so we've built that into the lessons. You can see them at our website, and they're available to samples for free. To see how we've built in the engineering mindset, but put so much of the learning into the hands of the learner, where a teacher can guide, facilitate, and manage the classroom, but doesn't have to have the knowledge or the expertise in those sophisticated areas. He helped us to understand that the horizontal is as important as the vertical. The compensation for a coder in the United States has been declining over the last 7 years. But if that coder also has some cybersecurity expertise, their compensation has been going up. So more and more, these teams that do these things, they're not working in isolation. They're working on an agile Scrum development team, and they need to know a little bit about all of the related areas. Drones, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity are linked together. You can't have one without the other. If you think about SpaceX, it took engineering to build those rockets. It took millions of lines of code to get them operational, constant data analysis to make sure that they were working effectively, artificial intelligence to feed that data to humans, and robotics to link it to the International Space Station. If you think about Disney and the number of animated movies they're rolling out with every year, the way they're doing that is an animator builds one frame, and then the 10th frame, and artificial intelligence fills in between. So a digital animator now needs to know some things about artificial intelligence. The projection is that 27% of the jobs in the world right now will be replaced by robots in 13 years. That means every child in our school needs to be able to work with, they need to be able to work on, they need to understand the field of robotics, because that's going to become a coworker in the workplace that they enter. Steve also emphasized, and he spent time teaching, he used to sneak away from Apple and teach 5th grade in California. Steve Jobs didn't even know about it. Steve Wozniak and John Couch were the ones that introduced the Apple computer into education, and the reason that we've had that benefit from that. And so he told us you can't scuba dive without an oxygen tank. If there's one thing that a teacher needs to be able to do these STEM projects, provide it to them. Don't put the burden on the teacher to go out and get painter's tape or the markers or an engineering measuring tape. Put it all in a box and give it to them from the get-go, or have things be cloud-based. And that's made a huge difference, because teachers act like it is the best day of their life when they open a box and every single thing they need to be able to do these robust things with the students is right there in front of them. They get more excited about the masking tape and the pieces of paper in the science journals than they do about the robots, because they know that means they don't have to go and get that stuff. Steve told us that if we can give kids broad exposure and let them find what they love and they're good at, they'll be lifelong learners, because they'll be motivated in those areas. We always want to do more of the things that we love and that we're good at. This is important work, and I applaud you for your own efforts and the things that you are doing. There can't be too much STEM, because right now there are several seemingly unsolvable problems that face our world, and our world needs great inventors. Our mission is to put the spark in those great inventors when they're young, and help make sure that the what if that Steve wondered about, of what if my father hadn't been an engineer, doesn't become the barrier between them going on to create something later that might change the world, just like Steve did. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I want to leave you with the WOZ's favorite equation. Happiness equals smiles, not frowns, minus frowns. Because if we find the things that we love and we're good at, the things that make us happy, happiness comes right along. I really appreciate this opportunity, and if we can help in any way with your own efforts, don't hesitate to reach out.
Let kids explore. Let them be a part of the whole world and do things that they like. Don't say, here's what you should study, here's the school you should go to because it will make you more money. When a child picks an area to pursue, encourage that interest and help them go in that direction. Give them support, give them education, give them the resources they need to succeed. Passion can't be assigned by a parent or a teacher, so children should be allowed to follow their curiosity and instincts. You might say their hearts. I did project after project in my life that wasn't worth a company or big money, but oh my gosh, I loved doing them and showing them off. It motivated me to keep going and going, to learn better and better techniques down to the finest detail. My vision for WOZ education is to give children the tools and experiences they need to be able to foster an engineering mindset at any age and allow students to think conceptually so they can be successful in any career they choose.
Okay, so Karen, that was a fantastic talk that you gave, and I'm sure there are so many questions. Let me take a look. Okay, here's an interesting one. As you probably know, many people consider learning at the early childhood stage to be the most critical. Is it possible to implement STEM education effectively at that stage? Alternatively, what is the most suitable age to teach children STEM subjects?
Boy, that's a question that we think about a lot, Johnson. If you think about Steve, who, as I mentioned before, serves as our inspiration, his father started him in STEM activities when he was 3 years old. And Steve was able to use that foundation because he got the opportunity to learn that young. But what we found in the United States is there's some resistance to starting this at 3 and 4 years old, even though he demonstrates that that can work. So we've had the most success in starting at kindergarten when the students are 5 years old, because at that point, the system of school has become a little bit more structured around the activities, and developmental appropriateness is not as big of an issue with the educators that are facilitating those experiences. So I would say that personally, I think you could start immediately. But in terms of the systems, it's important to be gentle with those systems and to be cognizant of what the educators in those systems believe is the right age of possibility. But we can demonstrate within our systems that kindergarten is a very effective time to start nurturing an education, an engineering mindset and computational literacy. And the system here seems to be most ready for it at that age.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, let's move on. We've got very little time. Second question. Nowadays, many children are glued to mobile devices that have become highly accessible, thanks to the innovation of Steve's old company. Excuse me. Naturally, as you can appreciate, parents worldwide are concerned about their children being overexposed to these devices. Do your STEM lessons include screen time? How does WOZ address this concern?
Oh, that's a fabulous question. Yes, we're worried about that too, particularly since the pandemic. How many hours and days have our kids spent glued to that screen? And Johnson, the thing that I'm worried about is they were consumers of technology. They weren't using technology as a driver to create something. So we're very conscious in the way that our lessons are structured, that the students aren't receiving instruction through the device. They're using the device as a tool to build something in collaborative groups. Our developers are parents, they share the concern. And I can tell you at our end, it has intensified over the last year and a half. So the collaborative nature of these projects don't have the students just learning through the device. They have the students harnessing that device to create something with CAD/CAM or with coding that becomes their own piece. It's such a different way of looking at it. I worry about the number of students spend being consumers of technology instead of use of technology to create something new.
Okay, that's comforting to know, Karen. Okay, so Karen, I just thought of one more thing. Because, well, in Malaysia at least, many students don't necessarily have a very good command of English. So would translation be necessary for them to pick up all these STEM lessons from WOZ?
Well, the projects that the students are working on are very hands-on. So it's not like a textbook where you're immersed in the language that you're comfortable with. It's more of an active process with things that are in dimensional thinking, like CAD/CAM and that kind of thing, or programming languages that you have to learn that new language anyway. The only real translation burden would be if the teachers didn't speak English. Then the teacher's guide, so that they could comprehend those lessons, would need to be translated. But that's honestly not a heavy lift.
Right. Okay, that's good to know. I'm sure many school leaders and teachers have found your presentation to be highly interesting and are wondering how it could practically benefit their schools. Could you please share a couple of specific examples of positive learning outcomes from the use of WOZ at STEM kits in the USA or other countries?
Well, Johnson, first, I hope you're right. If people did find it interesting, I feel very honored by that. So I want to thank you for that comment. And secondly, there are so many. You know, we had a young man who was on native land, which we refer to as reservation here in the United States, that had not been a good student. And then in 7th grade, he discovered STEM projects and he started to see himself in a different way. By the time he was in 9th grade, 2 years later, he got accepted into a summer program in coding and robotics at MIT. Now, he'd been a behavior problem. So 3 weeks into the 6-week program, MIT called the superintendent and said, we have to send him home. And the superintendent's immediate reaction was he got in trouble and this was the best opportunity of his life. And so he said, I'm so sorry. He said, what did he do? They said, oh, no, he didn't do anything wrong. He's finished everything. We have nothing more to offer him. Now, he ended up graduating from high school and going to school at MIT on a full ride scholarship. This was a bad student, Johnson. He perceived himself as a bad student, and look where he is now. A team of students that were 4th graders in New York, low-income area, post-industrial decay. The project with the 3D printer just said, build something that benefits your school or a classmate or your community, and you come up with the idea. So these 4th grade students decided they were going to build a prosthetic hand for their classmate that was born without one. That is not developmentally appropriate. I would never ask a 4th grade student to do that. It took them 5 months to master knuckles. But in 7 months, they built him a prosthetic hand for $12 that was functional. And now they've created a foundation 4 years later where they're building prosthetic hands for kids around the world that can't afford them. There are so many examples of what happens with STEM education when we make it project-based and we get out of their way. You know, as I mentioned before, we view the teacher as a context expert. Steve taught us that. And when we stay true to that belief, it's amazing what these kids can do.
Wow. Karen, listening to your stories, I'm getting goosebumps.
I get goosebumps, Johnson.
Wow, that is amazing. I can't wait to see what STEM kids, WOZ at STEM kids would do in Malaysia and Southeast Asia. So I really look forward to having them in my own hands tomorrow, please. Okay,
well,
so
we are so thrilled by the opportunity to do this. We've been so impressed with your vision and your insights and what you're going to do. And I think that we could create some great engineers together.
Thanks, Karen. I think so too. So thank you again for participating in this DEO 2.0, as we call it. So keep in touch and see you next time.
All right. Thank you. It's an honor.
All right.